Welcome to Subscription Prescription, the podcast where you get the information you need to scale your subscription program. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another dose of Subscription Prescription, the podcast where we help you figure out everything related to D2C subscriptions. I'm extremely excited for a very special dose coming to you live from Los Angeles at the ChargeX conference. This is the subscription-focused conference hosted by Recharge every year, and I'm joined by three other amazing subscription experts in the space. I've got Andriy Rudnyk from the Good Subscription Agency, Brian Stark from 100 Degrees Celsius, and Jordan Narducci from DTCPG. Guys, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks.
Pleasure
for
to be here.
Putting this on.
Yeah. We're chuckling a little bit because we just recorded the first 10, 15 minutes of this and realized I had the wrong mic connected. And
we had so much fun. We're like, let's have that exact conversation.
Let's just do it again. So, everybody, we're doing this just a little bit more on the fly, a little bit more. I'm so excited for the knowledge that is going to be dropped for you. So the format that we're going to be following here today is I'm going to ask everybody here around the table for that one tactic that they think is underused or that needs to be used in your subscription business. I'm going to ask everybody about a trend or trends they're seeing in the space that they're paying attention to. And then the final thing is going to be calling out anything they think is overhyped in the subscription space. So that's our format. Look, I think the intro was better the second time than the first time. So we're ready to dive in. So I'd like everybody to say hi, say your name so everybody listening at home can identify the name with the voice.
Yeah. So my name is Andriy. I'm from the Good Subscription Agency.
Hey, I'm Brian. I'm from 100 Celsius.
And Jordan from DTCPG.
100 Celsius. I keep saying 100 degrees Celsius.
You know what? It's my fault. It's a confusing name.
It's really hot. It's a hot name.
It is. It is.
I like the metric system that you stuck with. I was like, how many Americans is this for a lot? Is this a lot? How hot is it?
Fahrenheit's just so much harder to spell. So
that is true for SEO. That is much better.
Okay, so let's start out with the subscription tactic that you think is being underused in the space. Andriy, you go first.
So I think this is kind of a no-brainer. It's pre-selecting subscribe and save on your PDPs. But the reason I really wanted to touch on this when you obviously reached out and was like, hey, let's prep some notes, because I think it's really underutilized because from all of us tweak the customer journey from acquisition to the PDP to the cart, the checkout, the post-purchase, onboarding, cancel, win-backs, but nothing makes an impact on a business as much as pre-selecting subscribe and save on the PDPs. We work with brands where we've seen opt-ins go from 5% to 20% simply by switching that toggle from pre-selected subscribe and save. Now, not changing the offer, not changing the design. And what that really means is you double your subscription revenue by the end of the year. And this is not even tweaking anything else.
Just changing
the simple widget and simply tweaking your opt-in number in checkout. So the number of subscribers you acquire on a regular day from your paid traffic has tripled or quadrupled simply with this action. Now, there's we've covered a ton of hiccups when it comes to this.
Why are people resistant to doing this?
So now there's the resistance. So what we hear is a ton is, first of all, customer success issues. And we see spikes in tickets around, I didn't want a subscription. I felt tricked into getting a subscription. So there's a ton of ways that you can mitigate that with good design, better offers as well. I think that's one big piece. For example, we work with brands that have, pre-selected subscribe and save. However, their opt-in rates to subscribe is still in the 60, 70, 80% mark on the first order. Yeah. Now, they offer a really sweet deal. They give you a free gift on the first order. They give you discounts on subsequent orders. They give you free gifts along the way, surprise and delight, complete flexibility. They do a really good job of making sure that you feel like subscriptions are a no-brainer and to try, and they are risk-free to try out. And it's just silly to try to opt in. You click on one time and you realize, I'm losing so much. It's part of the design layout and it's part of the opt-out versus opt-in philosophy. But
I was going to say, maybe you were going to say the same thing, but that actually is, there's like multiple different levers to pull when you're creating a really good subscription plan, picker, and offer. There's pre-selecting it, making it the default option. There's increasing the value. There's decreasing the friction or reducing risk, like you said. And then there's also what you tapped on, which is kind of loss aversion,
Mm-hmm.
which I've actually seen recently being a really, really powerful tool. It can feel a little bit more like DR. It can feel a little bit more like if you're afraid to default to subscriptions, you're probably not going to be like, you're losing out, man, by not subscribing.
Yep.
But I will say that probably the brands, if you have merchants that are 60, 70, 80% subscription take rate, which is phenomenal, they're probably incorporating all four of those elements.
Yes. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I think it should be so visually clear when you click from subscribe and save to one time, that's the everything changes.
Yeah.
The colors are different.
Exactly.
The price is different. The free gift thing disappear. Like whatever you can do to show like, this is what you just lost
Right.
by changing
That's
that.
there's a marketing psychology to having like colors being in green when you're getting all these benefits, and then maybe they become red X's when you're not getting them, and then you get this FOMO of like the opt out, like going to select opt out actually takes effort, right? Versus oh wow, I'm getting all these benefits, I feel like a VIP. So I think it's really important to have all of those things working together, and then the way you display it as well is really critical.
Okay, so one thing, so we've pumped the tires for this strategy. Now, I really like the first take is that we kind of tore it apart in a number of ways.
Right.
And I do think that most people, because fundamentally what we're trying to talk to right now is listeners who probably haven't done it, because people who've done it, they're like, okay, cool, what's next, Matt? But people who haven't, what are some of the most common objections?
Can I give an example of a brand that I just started working with? I did an audit for, and they had this mindset that you had to try their product first before subscribing. That's a common
Kind of like
Brian.
buyer or owner bias. It's like I would never do this myself.
But here's the analysis I did that counters this, and this is where I think brands should think hard about that strategy. Is I looked at, so they have a variety pack. They're like, try these 4 different. They're kind of flavors, but they also are benefit use cases. Try these things, see which ones benefit you the most and which ones are most interested, and then subscribe to it. So that was their tactic. The problem with that, if you're not locking them into a subscription on that first order, subsequently, like what I find is the retention rate on that second order is 5 to 6 times lower than if you were to get a subscription. That's obvious, right? Intuitive. But what's crazy is then I did the math and looked at all of their subscriptions over all time and did the math on like, of those, how many are they bringing back who bought that product? And it was like high single digits, right? And I was like, our target, our North Star,
90% of people were not.
Yeah. My North Star with my brands, if you're getting brands that are 60, 70%, that's amazing. I would say the goal for me is to get to 50% of them.
Oh yeah.
Right.
That's the North Star.
Yeah.
That if you're doing 50% of new customers are subscribing, that's incredible. And so what we found is like, if you just change up that strategy and you're starting to lock in customers on that first subscription order, you're going to get a much higher lock-in than if you were to just buy that variety pack and then try to win them back. And so it kind of becomes the no-brainer of...
Well, Brian, you've done a ton of retention email work. Like what's a good opt-in rate for a repeat second order, regardless of subscription? Like what's a good, somebody bought something once and they come back a second time? 10%, 20%?
More than that, better than that. I mean, I think, but you touch on a real point, which is that brands that index more on that one-off purchase customer acquisition journey are just going to have a lower repeat purchase rate generally, obviously exceptions to the rule. And it's usually going to take longer for that customer to come back the second time. Yeah. So you're typically going to see like if a customer is going to, the one-time buyer problem is like one of the biggest challenges for retail in general.
Right.
And I think what's really the reason I love what Andriy is saying, I think it's like probably the best place to start. And I always think about like, what is a customer's default next action? If they come in as a one-time buyer, their default do nothing next action is nothing.
Not
right?
engaged.
It actually takes
Disengaged.
It actually takes effort for them to go buy again. If you acquire them on subscription, their default do nothing, check out, next action is they buy again.
Yeah.
And it actually takes effort for them to cancel and to stop buying. And it's like literally that default behavior switch is the reason why what Andriy just said is probably the most impactful thing. And it's more impactful than, it's not only more impactful for acquisition, but acquiring subscribers, the reason they're so much more valuable is just that default bias.
And I think just like from a simple numbers thing, because that's how I like to think of it too, is if I'm doing a 50% opt-in rate, why I have 50% of everybody that comes to my site that's getting one time, 50% that are getting subscriptions. And if I have a 50% repeat purchase rate, then my one-time purchasers, I'm going to get half of them are going to come back on a second purchase. On the subscriptions, if I have a 50% first month churn, which is abysmal, I'm the same as the one-time purchase, maybe off a little bit because of the discounts I'm giving for the subscribed sake. But if you're anything better than that, right, like those numbers pan out, and even when we're looking at like 80-20, 80 one-time, 20% subscriptions, and 80%, if I can get a 50% repeat purchase rate, which is pretty good, I'm going to get 40% of that cohort's going to stick around, whereas the subscribers, the math just plays out to go after.
And think about that 50% over the course of a year.
Yeah.
You're saying if I lose 50% of those new subscribers over the course of a month, it's terrible.
Yeah, right. But 50% in a year, I'm getting 10, 12 purchases depending on the frequency. Yeah. I think the other thing too is I always like to think about is like every e-com brand I've ever worked with, I'm sure you guys are the same, is strapped for resources. You don't have enough people. You have too many projects. Do you want to prioritize something that's going to have all these extra steps? Or do you want to just prioritize something that you know is going to have a better result? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so go after the golden egg right away, right? I think is the best approach.
Yeah, there's what's that private equity company? Is it Vista Capital or Bain Capital or one of these, where their whole thesis is basically we acquire companies, we come in, we identify the top 10 to 20% of their customers that have the highest LTV. We exclusively focus on acquiring more people that look like that, and then cultivating our existing customers to become more like that.
Exactly.
And so what you find, I think that the logic is basically, I'm sure you all have probably seen examples on the flip side, maybe, or where the discrepancy is not quite as big, but vast majority of brands we look at, their average new customer who comes on the subscription is so much more valuable. So it makes sense to just index everything to get those people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Great first question. I know we could just keep talking. So Brian, what is your one underutilized strategy you're seeing in subscriptions rate?
Okay. So this actually, I think I've been thinking a lot about this recently with all these. We're filming this. If you're listening somewhere down the line, you know a lot more about how all this tariff situation is going to shake out than we do. In April of 2025. But right now there's a lot of disruption. There's a lot of uncertainty in the market. And I think most merchants that we are talking to are looking pretty aggressively at their business and saying, hey, where can we put some additional money back to our bottom line? Where can we reduce costs, OpEx? And the thing that I've been thinking about is like, okay, in response to all this tariff stuff, what if your initial response isn't just about what you need to cut, but it's actually about things that you've been overlooking and opportunities to improve the margin profile of your business without making more drastic measures. And so one opportunity that I think a lot of brands have right now is to do what we call a staggered discount offer. And essentially all that is it's a specific discount or an offer for your first subscription purchase, and then it's a different offer for recurring subscription purchases.
So it's like 20% subscriber save now, 10%.
Right, yeah. 25% off order one on subscription, and 10% off recurring orders, or 15% off recurring orders. And the psychology behind it is, listen, like Andriy was saying, maximizing your first order subscription take rate is like one of the most impactful things you can do to grow your MRR. So with this staggered discount, you get to lead with maybe even a more aggressive first order discount. Maybe you are able to go a little bit higher because you actually are saving more on every renewal. And what we find when we've tested this with merchants is that subscription take rate stays about the same because we're leading with the same hook and savings call out. And it actually has a much smaller impact on retention than you would expect. And our hypothesis is just that basically customers, once they are in this sort of renewal rhythm, they don't place quite as much of a mental value and premium on a couple dollars of price difference, right? $4, whether it costs $35 or whether it costs $31. They're not really thinking about it quite like that. They're thinking, do I like this product?
A follow-up question though, because this came up with a client recently a couple actually, was this idea of, hey, we're going to give free shipping on the first order, but we're going to charge $5 on shipping on orders after the fact.
I feel
Have
like
you seen
that is actually a little bit of a different story.
Right, because
Because this is you're adding a line item.
Right.
So like I wouldn't necessarily go like a free shipping on your first order and then we're going to charge you shipping. I feel like that's easy as a customer to feel like a little bit bait and switched.
Yep.
But if you're explicit, you call out on your plan selector, like get 35% off your first subscription order and 10 or 15% off your recurring orders.
Yeah.
It's explicit, it's transparent.
And it still feels like a value.
And it still feels like a value because when you're making that initial purchase decision,
You're buying just the first order.
right. That's right. And so I think it's an amazing way if you are currently offering, 20, 25, 30% off. We have a client that is making the switch right now. They were offering 30% off every subscription order. And it's like, whoa, what if you just went down to 20% on recurring?
Exactly.
That's an additional 10%
On margin.
back
Your
on
margin.
that goes straight to the bottom line.
$5 to $10.
Yeah. And now imagine if you sell like an $80 product or whatever,
Yep.
like that is a ton of margin. And if you're thinking about, okay, I sold an $80 product, maybe I'm getting hit with a $10 tariff fee right now per unit sold or whatever, that could offset a lot of your costs on those renewal orders.
100%. Brian Tate, who's speaking at this conference later, who's the founder of Oats Overnight, he used this. I don't know if he coined this, but he was like, it's the marketing's job to get customers to subscribe.
Yeah.
It's the product's job to keep them.
So good.
Right. And I think that's like a really good analogy to think about your business. I think about it, the offer through the lens of like acquisition, right? It's an acquisition cost. There's no rule that it has to be the same on every order. Right. And I think if you have a good product and then you get your frequency right, which I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about, it's the product. You also have to have a product that delivers, right? And those three things are going to put you in a much better spot.
See, it's interesting because I haven't done a ton of work with like lowering the discount on subsequent orders, but I have worked with a few where they do progressive ones, right? So like maybe it's like, you get 10% off to subscribe and save, but the best offer is like you could get
by the time you get to renewal 6 or whatever.
I'm actually like a big, I guess this is jumping ahead.
Well, I will just say the brand that did it had insane retention.
Okay.
However, their subscriber base was really small because, in my opinion, the offer wasn't very aggressive.
Sure.
I think that you should be doing the opposite.
I agree.
The longer that you become a customer, the most likely they are to become a lifetime customer, right? So there's your discount should actually work in reverse order versus increasing over time. You're just giving up margin.
So have you seen one where
If I'm a customer,
30,
I don't know if I
25, 20, 25,
I don't know if I
10?
like that.
I haven't actually seen
No.
I
I would not recommend doing it like that.
No, I know,
because that feels like you're positioning, like you're like penalizing them for attention.
You don't want to do that, but I guess where you can do is right. If you look at this on a cohort basis, month over month, and you run some tests. First, it's 15% off subsequent orders. Then you go down to 10% off subsequent orders. Then you go down to like $2, right? And that's what a lot of these brands that do this really well have tested the crap out of this.
Yeah.
And they find that actually the churn rate doesn't change that much.
That's right.
And so you're just giving margin.
You guys are
away.
blowing my mind here.
Yeah.
It's actually crazy because people don't value like now there's the caveat here is like if your product is really, really expensive and the reason that people cancel is very much like heavily weighted towards price, then like, okay, anything you can do to reduce the cost burden on people is going to have a big impact. But if you're selling like a $30, $40, $50 product a month, you have a lot of wiggle room to play with. And I will say really quickly, I have not only been a part of different rollouts for the sort of the progressively bigger discounts with renewals. And I completely agree with Jordan. I think it is basically stealing margin from the very orders that you need to subsidize the high churn of your first and second renewals.
So, go ahead, but I have several questions.
One thing that I was going to throw in there, though, is by the time you're kind of pushing back on this, by the time you're testing somebody who's on their order 4, I think there's a different buyer psychology of it's not even about margin. It's about if I ordered a product 4 times, if it went up in price, I'm probably still buying it. It's not. So yes, it still validates the fact that you can give lower discounts, but I think it's less price sensitivity by that time, they have gotten the product into their routine. They're not buying a fourth order, fifth order by accident.
The question that I'm thinking about is like you mentioned, like the PE firms approach. So the idea, like, and again, I love that because I think most subscription brands don't have this philosophy, which is we have a very profitable cohort. How do we get everybody else into that cohort? But if that cohort isn't, what incentives do you get somebody to get to that order 4, 5, 6 where the discount won't matter if the discount was part of the incentive to get them to try the product in the first place? How do you enable a journey?
It's to drive the trial, to your point, but it doesn't need to be the reason they stay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The product should be the reason they stay. The product and the consumption patterns need to be aligned.
Yep.
And then the price in general needs to be aligned. Now, I would also argue that if I'm taking back margin, that also means in my cancellation portals, I can be more aggressive with trying to keep somebody if I want it to be that way as well.
Right.
As well as like, 1 to 2 orders.
Take that extra margin and do like a subscriber only giveaway every month.
Yeah.
Where like, oh, hey, if you're an active subscriber, you get entered to win a freaking motorcycle. Or something every month.
Battle box when you're shooting the tank. Yeah, well, I think that is the hard part, right? You have to think of other ways to become more creative. Like if a company has like a really diverse SKU catalog, I always recommend using your own catalog as gift options instead of discounts because the margins, you're going to preserve more margin.
Well, one thing that I just want to touch is that just having a healthier business actually enables you to have fun with your business and have fun with your customers and having an active community. And this is why BattleBox does such a great job, is because they are a very healthy financially set up business, and they can do contests and giveaways and give people $50,000 and fly people out and get them to shoot tanks every basically battle games or a year. So, but really comes down to getting your margins tweaked up to the point where you can have fun with your business.
I had this question, and I met with somebody who ran OpEx at Dollar Shave Club at one point because I've been a subscriber for 7 or 8 years.
Oh, I love those conversations.
and my question is, I've literally never once bought an upsell. They've sent me stuff that I've never used all the time. I just buy the razors at the cadence that works for me to shave my head and my face. That's it. And so my question was, and he didn't know this because he wasn't in the business anymore, is, am I a high LTV customer for that brand? Or am I not? Because I didn't buy all the stuff. I'm not buying the body wash and the aftershave and the whatever crap. I'm just buying, a little 4-pack of razors every 2 months for 7 years. In addition to like the handles and whatever when I have to replace them. And so that's sometimes the question that I'm always curious about is like, because when somebody hits month 4 or 5 or 6, what do they really care about? And that's where I think the question that most brands aren't asking is like, is it the price or is it the product? Is there another perk or a benefit that they're going to care more about? Because a 6-month subscriber is totally different than a first-month subscriber, right? Yeah. They're just like, well, I was going to say something I can't publish. But anyway, okay. So amazing discussion. We're going to keep it rolling. Okay. Jordan, what is a tactic you're seeing work in subscription space right now?
I think we're just going to kind of shift this conversation to keep it going on the offer train. I think like if you think about the opt-in rate, which is what Andriy was saying is really important to think about, right? Getting to that 50% North Star, you can do it through discounts, which is usually where I start with my clients, right? Like a 25-10. There's also like another thing I think it's important to call out is there's a sweet spot here because as you increase your offer, the more you give away as a discount on that first order, the higher your churn is going to go up. That's just inevitably what happens, right? So you have to look at the cohort analyses and you have to test things and figure out what that sweet spot is in terms of offer, the discount offer on that first order versus the churn rate, right? And you kind of maximize for those two things. Based on people who are a lot smarter than me and brands who have done a lot more testing than this, 25 to 35% is usually that sweet spot, just to kind of throw it out there. There's another way to get margin back while also playing into this concept, which is the idea of using free gifts as an arbitrage for value. So what I mean by that is instead of just giving 25% or even 35% away in real value, right? That's real revenue you're missing. If you were to give a product that costs maybe $5 to acquire, right, to buy, like maybe it's a shaker bottle for a protein brand, right? But you're able to market that at $25 off, right? And then you market it as a percentage of the total discount. So in other words, you're not giving actually 25% away. You're giving the $25 value, and that makes it a 25% offer.
Mm-hmm.
Or another thing that people are sleeping on that I'm starting to do with my clients is touched on this briefly, is free shipping is almost a default for a lot of subscriptions, but no one talks about the value that they're giving away. That's like $10 in value. That's $10 in margin.
Shipping's interesting.
What if that was presented as a percentage? Right?
So you're talking about taking all these different elements and actually presenting them in a way so that the customer understands that there's additional value.
Yes. It's like arbitraging also on the cost to you versus the value you're able to advertise.
And I know you're going to jump in here. I'm just going to say one thing. The example I like using all the time with clients and people I talk to is if you have a $50 average order value, 10% off is $5.
Right.
So if you're trying to do 20 or 30% on a discount, you're giving away $10 to $15 worth of margin. Okay. Right. If I can do that discount at 20% and then a product that has a landed cost to me of $250, I'm saving $250 in margin instead of Exactly. That is exactly the cost to you versus the perceived value.
Exactly.
I love that.
And you can get the same level of opt-in, but give less away on the offer. But this is things you have to be testing constantly.
And I would argue that I think in many ways you acquire a better subscriber in general because they're less deal seeking. They see more value.
And then the other thing that I want to call out is the best brands then do subsequent offers, right? So it's free gifts that you get along the way to make them stickier, right? So it's the combination of what are you doing on that first order? And then what are you doing on the second, third, fourth? Really, like it's the first 3 orders afterwards that the most churn occurs, because after the 4th order, 5th order, they kind of start to become customers for life. Sure, they might get, they might have product pile up and you need to adjust frequencies and such. But if you can get them to the 4th or 5th order, that's what really matters. And so I think don't also sleep on either surprise and delight moments, small sample size items that you can give away as driving trial that has value attached to them. 5 sample items you could say is $10 to $20 of value, right? But you're giving it away for free. But then they're also trying additional products in your catalog. So there's a lot of tactics you can do, not just on that first order, but also marketing, like what we talked about at the beginning, the benefits of this program. I like to call it, you want to make subscription a no-brainer, but you want to also elevate your subscribers to the VIP level, right? That they all feel like they're getting these exclusive benefits and deals and there's all these things. And then when they go to cancel, by the way, they're going to see that thing that they're supposed to get on the next order and be like, oh, that's a really cool little tote bag that I'm going to get on. Maybe I'll wait this extra order and do it on the next one, right? And so it makes you reconsider this $25, $30 item that you're going to get that's unique to subscribers. Might keep them a little longer, right?
Right. Another reason why I think the physical product route, the free gifts, works better on those renewals than progressive discounts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now, my question to you, Jordan, you mentioned it's a really, really smart concept around this idea of like the discount versus gift arbitrage. And I think for your initial offer, like we just spoke with a brand that is a cereal brand. They get like 50% opt-ins with no additional subscription discount. So 50% subscription, which is actually pretty ludicrous. And the only difference is that they offer a bowl and a spoon for subscription. and then when you switch off, it goes away. Right. So like really smart. I mean, I think that the presentation there is really amazing. The question I have is when you present the value of those free gifts, that if it costs $3 to you and you're saying it's a $20 value and we're baking that into the percentage, is that misleading?
You could say the same thing about every product, right? Yeah. Like every product you sell.
Well, right.
It's your COGS against your revenue.
But if it's a freebie, is it misleading to bake it into?
I understand the root of your question. The thing is that most of these products are merchandise that's sold on the store for some actual value. I'm not saying you're just making up like some crazy. I mean, with that said, a lot of brands do give away for 1 free month of an app that's $25 value. I do think there is like some manipulation around that, but what I'm talking about, physical products are usually available for sale on your site. For some value that's in line with your overall margin makeup, right? And you're doing the same thing with your products. Like you could make the same argument around like, when you subscribe, you get a free like AG1 to this. They're the OGs, right? Free vitamin D bottle, right? That bottle probably costs them a couple dollars, right? But they're saying it's a $20 value or whatever it is. So
I think the hard part is how you position all that on one little buy box. Right? Like,
Yeah.
if I'm going to say like, hey, the shaker bottle is a $25 value. Okay, I can make that a little sticker or a badge, right? And that's a free gift. And then, but when I'm putting like the price, it's like, hey, this thing might be $90 or it's $100 normally, but it's $90. Subscribe and save.
Yeah, the brands that this is where, like, again, like the way you present your offer is really important. And I think the brands that do it best have created product pages that mimic their landing pages for paid, and they kind of look the same. And what it does is it presents all of the gifts, and then you can also see like show your upcoming freebies, right? So it also shows month 1, 2, 3, 4.
I think that's a totally underutilized tactic as well. It's like that visual journey of subscription stuff. Okay, I guess it's my turn for the tactic that I'm seeing growing with a lot of like momentum. We've implemented with a number of clients, and I've audited some pretty massive clients that are doing it as well. And that is the idea of a bulk option. So the idea is, and trying to define this, I've done some recent like doses about this. In fact, just a couple weeks ago on this with like some visual breakdowns and stuff because it's hard to show. But the idea is you're going to allow somebody to subscribe to a 1-month supply, a 3-month supply, or a 6-month supply. You could do 1, 2, 3. You could do 1, 3, 12. But for the purposes of this example, it's I'm getting a 1-month subscription, a 3-month subscription, or a 6-month subscription. And so the reason that I really like this is a couple of reasons. One, we're able to visually show a couple of different options with different prices. And since if I'm getting you to buy more, I have more margin that I can give away on that order. So if I normally have a $50 AOV, a quarterly option might normally be $150. Instead of giving you, say, like 20% off the subscription, I can now give you 30% off that subscription because there's more margin. That works for a couple of reasons. One, if you don't understand this, it's okay, but your cash to conversion cycle. You're getting more money back in the business faster. That actually has a higher value than waiting for payments to hit over the course of time. The second piece is I was in shipping before subscriptions, so this is just part of how I think about things. Is the cost to ship 3 of something is never 3 times as much as it is just to ship 1. So you protect more margin that way. So from an OpEx standpoint, from a profitability standpoint, what we can offer standpoint, it works really effectively. The other thing is there's a little bit of price anchoring depending on how you're doing this, right? Like if you're doing the bigger option from left to right, or you're doing the smaller option from left to right, people are able to see a middle option. And so what we're seeing is a really strong opt-in rate for the middle option. And ultimately what I'll kind of wrap up by saying is this is really all about lowering the cost to acquire a customer and increasing the amount of subscribers you get.
Can I make one point there that I think is really critical? Because I focus a lot with my clients on just LTV more broadly. How do we increase your average order value, which is tactics like you're describing, bringing up the number of orders on that first order, the number of units on that first order is one really great tactic. Buy more, save more. The thing that most brands get wrong is they don't adjust the frequency accordingly. And so they end up just basically stealing from themselves 2 months later when they all churn, right?
And I will say this, the whole point of this strategy is you're locking in. I'm giving you a 1-month supply on a 1-month frequency. I'm giving you a 3-month supply on a 3-month frequency because I've audited some pretty large brands where they'll try to get you to buy as much as possible up front, and then they have their churn just drop. Their retention drops off a cliff because they don't
change it from monthly. Everyone they're going to lock in a 6 unit order on that first one, and then it's monthly on the next one.
I will also finalize by saying, because the LTV question. So the brands that we've done this with, we've seen an increase in conversion rates, period. So CAC goes down by adding the bulk option. So that's the first thing.
And the average order
value goes up. Goes up. But where I think the real beauty is that a 3-month or a quarterly subscriber, and I've looked at least 15 cases of this, I have not once seen a 3-month subscriber retain at a lower percentage than a monthly subscriber over the same time period.
100%.
So the quarterly subscribers or the semi-annual subscribers are going to retain at a higher percentage point than the monthly would.
This is something we've seen also. It's like the longer you actually extend the spend cycle, the more you actually retain. Like churn is pretty much very closely tied to the pre-selected frequency that you onboard customers onto. So generally what we, for example, do with onboarding is we get people to start off with a slower frequency and then train them how to adjust it back. to get them to bypass too much product or overstock churn. So yeah, it's like very, very closely tied to the pre-selected longer replenishment cycles pretty much all across the board just mean less churn.
And just to, like, again, I don't have like an Excel sheet to show everybody this, but I do think it's important to say, like, when you have that 136, I'm not getting 90% of the people taking the 6-month option. I'm getting like 1 or 2% getting that. I'm getting 5 or 10% of people picking the middle subscription option. And I'm still getting like 50, 60% of people taking the monthly and another 20, 30% grabbing or more grabbing the one.
Now there's two main ways to structure a bulk option plan picker. And actually which one you choose makes a big difference on the other equation, which I agree. It increases AOV, it increases we've seen it increase conversion rate, it increases overall churn rate. Or improves that, and it really increases your subscription take rate.
Right.
But the way that you do that, what we've seen is you have the 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 6 tiles above, and then subscribe and save at one time. That's one way to do it. The other way, which we found to be, in some cases, more effective at maximizing take rate, is like a 1-month supply, 3-month supply, one-time purchase, and a vertical stack. And so what you're seeing here is that basically you have 2 subscription options and 1 one-time purchase, and your one-time purchase option is the third worst.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. And
I've seen some of those too. Yeah.
Right. And so it's really cool. Now, this gets to the point, I think, which people are always, I think there's always a little bit of tension for brands between subscription and this idea of do we optimize for subscriber acquisition or do we optimize for AOV?
Right. Because
if you're running ads right now, you know that cost of acquisition CPAs are constantly rising. And so a lot of brands are like, well, gosh, does it make more sense for me to drive people to subscription purchases where I'm making less money on that first order? Or do I try to go for big bundles? And I think that this idea of selling the bulk on a longer delivery cadence really helps with that idea where you're basically like, hey, it's the best of both worlds. Yeah. Stock up, get a better deal independently when you get a 2, 3, 6-month supply, and get an even better deal when you subscribe and save. I was telling Jordan earlier that I actually have a hot take on this, though.
Yes, I know. You told me too. I've been waiting to hear it.
So I will preface this by saying that I love this. I think this is like one of the bulk subscription options is like one of, if not like the top kind of default recommendation we have for so many brands. Is like, listen, you could go from like 30% to 50% take rate.
And just to throw it in, because worked on a number of subscription boxes that do, monthly, quarterly, or annual subscription boxes. Like in the subscription box space, that's fundamentally a lifeline for many, many businesses where selecting annual plan, which is like on a quarterly box, it quadruples your average order value. And also, so it locks in a customer for 4 orders. But also, even with the fact that only 15 or 20% of customers will take that, because your average order value is 4 times higher on a quarterly box or a monthly membership versus an annual membership, on a 20% opt-in even into an annual membership, your average order value still triples on the first purchase, which is, again, business changing for a lot of businesses. So again, it's like very, very
what you're really talking about is a lot of brands, the number of orders they get on average, like the lifetime orders in that 12-month cycle, you're locking in on that first order.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Or more. Yeah. Right. So it's like
you're beating your churn.
I will say though that the difference between a prepaid option, which is I'm paying for 6 orders that I get shipped every single month, versus getting 6 months supply at once, are different in one major area, which is the 6-month one. People will potentially ask for refunds if they don't like it. Whereas if you've gotten 6 months of supply, you can't really get a refund.
That's true,
right? You can't get out. So, but we interrupted your hot take.
Yeah, no, it's okay. The hot take is basically this, and I'll actually pose this as a question to you guys if you've thought about this. By predefining the delivery cadence, so let's say you sell a 3-month supply, shipped every 3 months. By pre-selecting that, by predefining that, are you actually shooting yourself in the foot financially? And the reason that I say this is think about your customer base, right? You have let's say you sell like some sort of a sleep hot chocolate or sleep gummy or whatever, right? It's something for sleep.
We literally did this for a sleep hot chocolate brand, so it's funny that you mentioned that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So sleep hot chocolate. You have a spouse. You've got a wife.
Mm.
What are the odds that you try it and you're like, hey, this is really good. Hey, wife, you should try this too.
Or with this specific brand,
Yeah.
it was like one scoop works for the average person. Some people
Double
actually
up
want to
for
double
an
up
extra
double,
dose,
or you only need half. So
or think about creatine.
And scoops are so inconsistent. You can spill it. Like I overfill it.
Right. AG1, if you go look at what they're doing right now, they do the same thing, but they position it as: do you want a single subscription? Do you want a double subscription? Do you want a family subscription? And I think that there's an opportunity here. I actually think, if we think about what are some upcoming trends in the marketplace, and I know that that's maybe going to be something we talk about. My thing would be selling subscriptions to the family or to the household, and not to the individual.
Really interesting idea.
A recent brand. I think brands that do this really well. I think it's different for every brand, and you have to think about this. But there are some brands, for example, kids products, right? Like kids vitamins. Maybe you have 2 kids, right? That's a perfect example of how many kids are in your household.
Right.
I think Grunz does this really well. They have 2, like a toggle for 2 people versus 1. So it really just depends. I think you can kind of combine all of these tactics, though.
You can,
and you can still have that. And now it's just like multiplying.
But ultimately, what you want is, if you have this big subset of customers, all things considered, right? You'd rather sell somebody on subscription.
Yeah.
You'd rather sell a larger quantity.
Right.
But all things considered, you'd also rather sell that 3-pack every month.
Yeah, to 2 people or 3 people.
Absolutely. And I think ultimately
If
that's
the-
where, to me, like, I think, like, yes, you've mentioned like Runs and a couple other like ways of how they're doing that. I think it really does come down to like after purchase communication and making sure like you're having, because like, as we all know, not every subscription platform on the back end is created equal. And when it comes to adjusting selling plans on quarterly subscriptions, it can be a little bit tricky. Some of the systems that we're using, it's like really, really effective. So if you're like, hey, I need to get it a week sooner, or now I want it to be on like a 2.5 month cadence, it's easy to adjust that, because you're right. I think though it does come down to like having to understand your typical user and some of those use cases, and building out flows for like, you know, like if I know that this is something my spouse might want to try, like I'm going to maybe potentially like gift an extra one occasionally, right? Or I'm going to gift a card where you can redeem for one.
The other reality is 99, I think it's 100 probably, but you said there's a couple that aren't. Andriy was saying that some of his clients aren't, but most brands, the number one reason that people cancel is they have too much product, right? So then you break that into like the why, which I know you guys have talked about a lot. But I think it's important to think about, like, if that's the number one reason people are canceling, what are you doing to counter that, like in the way you approach it thereafter? And I just lost.
No, I would argue that the 1 month cadence is the most guilty of that problem, because what happens is I buy on the 1st, the product doesn't ship to the 5th, I get it on the 10th.
That's the real.
And then I have 30 days supply, but I'm now have, by the time my renewal email comes in, 5 days before the order, I've used half of a month, 15 days.
If you've been consistent and you started immediately.
As opposed to say like a quarterly or a semi-annual, there's a lot more, I think there's a little bit more variance in the fact of like, hey, if it's 2 weeks earlier, like, oh, whoop-de-doo, I've already gone through 2.5 bottles to get to that point. If I'm adopting it, I think
that's exactly right. I think it's really important is to get that right, is to make it friction free for customers to change that. I think Recharge just gave a stat that 55% of subscribers change their orders, which means they're traveling or people forget. I think the reality is, like, we're all subscribers to something. There's no way we're taking it every day. I mean, it's very rare that you're taking something every day, unless maybe shaving. Maybe shaving might be an exception.
Then I don't shave every day.
Then,
I now have my Freebird for a couple of days a week, and I use a straight razor.
So like getting that cadence right is never possible. And so it's like, it's the friction-free way to change that. And I think a lot of people in the households, if you want to share it, sometimes it's like, well, I have a ton of this product, like you should try, like you're sharing it anyways, and it still doesn't maybe hurt the overall amount of product that you have.
And this is what I really like the fact that you brought up this point, because I think it shifts our thinking from incentive of placing a recurrent order versus to how do you actually use the product, and what is the consumption replenishment trigger for the customer.
Exactly.
Right? Is it that I'm third, like I only have a third left? It's probably time for that notification to come in now,
Yep.
rather than being like, actually, it doesn't matter how good the third order deal is if I still have 80% of the product left.
Right.
And everything you just said and what you brought up too just makes me think of sometimes brands don't, and this is what's really hard and why I think we all have jobs as consultants. Brands have a hard time of stepping back.
Yeah.
And asking, what's the real reason somebody isn't using this right away?
Yeah.
What's the real reason why somebody's running this too soon or not fast enough? Like, what are the real reasons that are happening here? Because there are ways that we can build an experience that's actually good.
So one of my client that we were talking about this monthly issue, and they were like, well, the reality is, because I was saying what you guys were saying, like it doesn't ship till a few days later, and then you don't get it till maybe a week. Like I didn't get their product till a week, right? Which is longer than, some, but still that's probably pretty standard. And she was like, well, that won't be an issue because the reality is the same thing's going to happen next month.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, no, but the reality is you're going to send out that reminder email 5 days before, and now they have 14 too many items, right? Like if they were supposed to be consuming this every day. So it actually does matter because of the reminder email. And so I think that's a
if you're even sending one, right?
if you're not
sending one, turn yours on. Yeah, just turn it on.
Okay. All right. We have been going for like 45 minutes, and I usually don't go more than an hour on this podcast. So I'm going to skip the trends section.
Okay.
Because, if you want to know trends, you need to be subscribed to this podcast.
Subscription.
Just teasing. Because I want to spend some time on hot takes, things that are overrated in the subscription space. And I'm going to say something that you're probably all going to shoot me down for, but I will say I'm going to start on this one just as an easy way. I think that the subscriber portal design and upsell ecosystem is overhyped by subscription platforms. And the reason I say that is because of this. Most people go to the subscription portal for one of two reasons. And I would say this is 99. Nobody goes to the subscription portal to look out for an upsell.
Yeah, to buy stuff.
They're either going to cancel or they're going to adjust their schedule because something is off for them, right? Okay. So as long as those two things are being addressed, meaning you have a cancellation flow with offers that you're testing, that's critical. And the other piece is making it really easy to make adjustments to the frequency, which again, you could actually do both of those things in the email, right? With some quick actions or Zamo. That's the core reason. Now, I get that everybody's hyping like the upsell and the banner and all that stuff. I think it's overhyped. I think the reason to buy a subscription platform is not how pretty your subscription portal looks. That's my hot take.
I think your upsells should come pre-purchase and then during your reminder emails as cross sells.
I don't think are any of us going to argue with that on. I mean,
we're gearing up to argue with that.
No, I mean, I'm not personally.
It's not why people are going to the portal.
The thing is, the design of the portal, because, like you said, 50% of that customer interaction is changing frequency or changing the next upcoming order date. I do still think even in that very simple UX flow, you can do better or worse.
Oh, for sure. No.
He's saying around upsells, right?
I'm thinking of more of just the hype that we see. I'm not going to I'm not going to call out specific marketing campaigns or all that. There are times when I believe a subscription platform is hyping how their portal looks.
Yeah.
And I think if you're, and then I hear also, I'm sure you guys have heard this too, where I hear from clients or potential clients that are evaluating platforms, and they tell me one of the top reasons they're choosing A over B is how the portal looked. I come close to losing my shit.
Yeah. but I think I think what Andriy's saying, and I think it's important to call out, is for upselling, I agree. For the way that you're managing your subscription, and there are tactics, things like delay a couple weeks.
Oh, absolutely.
Or skip, or like really.
Are you sure you want to pause? Maybe you just want to delay.
Or actually, like most of them are like the pause is actually just which I don't. So I don't personally. I also don't like the pause button because I don't like skip when it's like, well, if you're going to delay a certain time frame, great, that's really easy. But pause is, and then in the back end that you can unpause them automatically, which I get why the brand wants to do that. But if you're going to do that, turn that off and just make it a delay.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly.
Next hot take. Or do you have something else you want to add?
We could talk about portals for a long time. I would say one thing that brands, I think, maybe on software procurement for subscription apps is a very complicated process, actually. And I get why customers and brands would go, well, most of the current issues we have right now is subscriptions are clunky, and a lot of the churn we see is too much. I can't figure out how to do this. So they look at, unconsciously, they get on a couple of calls with salespeople from apps, and they all shown, oh, look at our portal. It looks
Look how easy it is to use, and it can be branded.
And we can do upsells and banners and promos.
Do you guys ever get shown by clients like Magic Minds? Or
Let's see. Their customer portal? No.
Yeah, like, because there's a couple, like, you know, the bellwethers in the space, and so it's often like, hey, look what so and so's doing.
One thing I will say about, like, going back to what I was saying around the free gifts over time, if you can display that in the portal as a churn
absolutely.
tactic,
Absolutely.
I think it's really
Again, I think that the idea of, like, we're trying to do this a little bit more with some of our clients, but the hard part with that is, like, okay, if you don't have a clear strategy on what's happening month 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 from a discount perspective, is you can't show it visually. But when you can show that, like, on the PDP and then in the portal and even in a billing reminder email, like, anyway.
But even if you're not showing that, maybe like credits is another way, or like some sort of loyalty
Credits
offering
is a good
that if they
option.
go to cancel and they're like, you're going to lose all this money, are you sure you want to do that? Like that's an easy win that anybody can do through a lot of the subscription, including.
Okay, who wants to go next on hot take?
Okay,
Or overhyped.
I think we kind of talked about this, but free trial. I just don't think it works for most brands. There are a small margin of brands that it actually works. And when I say free trial, is you get the product for free on the first order. Maybe you pay for shipping,
and it converts to a subscription.
And it converts to a fully paid product on order 2. I just never seen it really work because you effectively have to convert a customer twice to becoming a trial customer and then becoming a fully paid customer. And the churn that you lose in that process is just too much from free order to paid order, and then from paid order to second order. It just never made sense to me, rather than just having a really, really nicely tuned, or even a basic subscribe and save offer at the first purchase for paid traffic, and then just have, like, you skip the free trial period.
I'll give you an example of this, of like data to bring that home. I had a brand who did this on a January, like they were a health and wellness brand. In January, they gave away a free product. On the first subscription order, you just had to pay shipping.
Mm-hmm.
Their opt-in rate went from about 20, they were around 25% to 60%. Amazing, right? You think that's incredible. The next month, their churn rate 3x'd. So their opt-in rate went up about 1.5x. Their churn rate went up by 3x. So it's like,
the math.
That's what I was saying. There's this like pendulum that you need to think about, that there's this sweet spot between those two things. Anything above 35%, I would question, at least as a straight discount. You know, if you can incorporate gifts and things as value creation, I think that's a difference.
Do you think it's a tactic that's useful at times, though? If, like, okay, so yes, my churn was significantly higher, but I still acquired some subscribers.
I never think it's a good idea.
Okay.
There's a sweet spot. There is a clear, like, I think that's the example I gave was an extreme, but like a real example. And there is a sweet spot there. I don't think free gifts really ever matter.
Or free trial.
Free trial. Yeah. The one place I will say, I was just talking to someone about this. They figured out a way to acquire customers a lot more cost effectively through that mechanism. Their churn did go up, but they said that the CAC, offset, and because they had such a low cost product, they could recover some of that through their shipping amount, right? So sometimes there's like this way to gain the shipping rate.
It's a really good point. Like we all are going to talk about how great it is to maximize subscription take rate and like why subscriptions are so much better. But like, you shouldn't sacrifice your front end economics just for the sake of acquiring a subscriber.
Yep.
Right. Like unless you know your number is so cold, unless you are like so dialed, like don't delude yourself into a bad acquisition offer and bad acquisition strategy just for the sake of getting people on subscription.
It also takes a long time to know what the true LTV of that cohort is.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
yeah.
It's like you'll know in month one, you'll know the following month retention rate. But
do we want to make overhyped the LTV reporting metrics in subscription apps?
That is, I don't, but
I actually don't think that's over. I think like
It is, but okay, let me clarify what I mean.
Okay.
Most subscription cohorts are showing you people that have not canceled. They're getting better. There are several of them that are showing you like when an order actually processed. So you have to toggle to that window. But for a long time, and a lot of people just look at, I know people haven't canceled. That is not the same
that's fair.
as how much money they've spent.
Actually bringing in
and
orders.
And what month that's happening. Because like Recharge does a great job of here's month 0, here's the initial month's purchase. But the other apps will show like a month 1, but month 1 is actually not the first renewal. It's before the first renewal.
Yeah.
So there are some issues related to that come up.
Hot take for me that I think people don't pay enough attention to is your welcome offer via email and SMS. A lot of brands they disincentivize subscription by saying get 15% off your first order, excluding subscriptions. This was my big unlock. I mean, this is how I got into this space. This is what Momentous was doing when I joined and started running that brand. And they were excluding the behavior they wanted, right? Which at the end of the day, you want it. So either you need to stack that discount on top of it, or in fact, what I've done is I've implemented what Brian was suggesting, 25/10 on a client's website. And then all I do is say in the opt-in in the opt-in email pop up, I say get 25% off your first
ownership order,
and you're going to get it anyways. You don't need a code, but then they get the email and you remind it. We got a 3x improvement in the opt-in rate. We got a 3x improvement in the number of click-through rate, and a 3x improvement in the conversions from those emails.
Yeah, that is like we call it like the state the obvious pop up, and it's like, if you're going to make a baller subscription offer, why do anything else for your pop-up? Just like attach it.
It's
so
like
okay. We had people walk into the room and interrupt us. We have to wrap up. Brian,
so I'm going to give you a quick hot take, and it needs a lot more unpacking, but I'll say this. I think that gamification, surprise and delight rewards are overhyped.
That was my second pick.
Yeah.
I'm going to have Brian write up a post about that, so we're going to expand on it. Thank you for tuning. This has been another dose of Subscription Prescription. Thank you so much, guys. I will have everybody's LinkedIn profile linked in this. It is so great chatting with you and talking strategy, and end it on a high note.
Boom.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Next time.
Thanks for having us, Matt.
That's it for today. Thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe so that you can get notified when new episodes come out each week on Tuesdays.